From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, welcome to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. I want to thank you for joining us on this powerful Super Talk Mississippi radio network or on Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. But if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast, it is March the 14th, 2022. Got a little cold blast. Over the weekend. Not what you would typically see this time of year, but it's going to start to warm back up again. Hope you enjoyed that little breath of cold air. Turkey hunting is in full swing across the state of Mississippi. Fishing, with the exception of this past weekend, fishing is beginning to kind of heat up. We're seeing lots of good reports of speckled trout and redfish, and offshore things are really beginning to show some life. And as we go forward, it's going to really get good. I'm looking forward to kind of shifting gear and moving into my offshore mode here from Biloxi. By the way, if you want to see our Super Talk Outdoor shows, the videos for the show, we put all of them on Facebook and YouTube. You can go to the Super Talk Outdoors Facebook page and follow us and share us with your friends, the people love Mississippi's outdoors. Well, I have a little frog in my throat today. My wife Ann and I are on the backside of the flu, not COVID, just the seasonal flu. Last Friday, I drove up to my place in the Mississippi Delta. We call it Delta Bluffs. It's the hunting club we have there. We lease 3 different farms up there. My friend Mark Creech joined me there. The plan was to pull some cameras, to move a couple of stands, to clean the camp house, pick up the deer meat at BB's and Greenwood. You know the drill. I got there before Mark, and I actually was able to get the camp cleaned out, but that's about as far as I got. I felt the flu coming on. I had a really tough night Friday night, and got up in the morning and said, I think I can get back to the coast. So I made that drive back to the coast. And on the way, my wife calls me and says she's running a temperature. So the two of us, thank goodness for our doctor, Dr. Matakavari in Biloxi, and some Tamiflu and some rest. We're doing better today, even though I'm a little bit froggy still. The good news is Mark was able to get a lot of work done still at the camp, thank goodness. And, one thing that he ran across while he was out pulling some cameras was a cow grazing on one of our favorite food plots. I mean, that was not a sight that you normally see. I posted the video at our Facebook page, and it's gotten thousands of views already. I think people are bored because deer season's over. Lots of funny comments. Somebody said that was a black panther, and others said it was some kind of genetic species. Anyway, people are having a lot of fun looking at the cow video. The cow actually belongs to our neighbor Michael Gailey. The Gailey family, terrific neighbors, just some of the best people you ever want to know. He was able to go in and corral the cow back up and fix what was essentially a hole in the fence. So now let's move over to Trevor Santos, the Director of Governmental Relations and State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Good afternoon, Trevor. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, good afternoon, Ricky. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for joining us. So we got a lot to talk about. I mean, first of all, the work that you do in general as it relates to conservation in states is incredibly important. We're going to remind people, at least explain to them what the National Shooting Sports Foundation is all about. But before we go there, tell me, first of all, you're coming in from your home in Athens, Georgia, right?
Yes, sir. Located here just outside of Athens, been here about 4.5 years after escaping Washington, D.C., where I did about a 7-year stint up there working in government relations, but grew up in Florida, so it's good to be back down south.
Well, it's good. It's glad to have you here. And I know I've often quoted several people on the work that Georgia has done in the area of conservation as it relates specifically to the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that I talk so much about here on this show. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. But, where did your love of the outdoors come from, Trevor?
Well, Ricky, it's a bit unique because I grew up in Tampa, Florida, in the suburbs of Tampa, not a whole lot of hunting, didn't grow up around friends that hunted, but I was very fortunate to have family in South Georgia and Albany, Georgia. And it was really my uncle who instilled a love for hunting in me at a young age, taking me out to the deer stand with him, to the dove field. And that really sparked my interest as I started to get near graduation in college and try to figure out what I wanted to do. And thankfully, that passion is what ultimately led me here today, now 12 years after graduating from college.
Well, that's cool. So you went to the University of Florida. What'd you get a degree in?
I did. I went to the University of Florida. Go Gators! It's tough being here in Athens, Georgia, Bulldog country as a Gator. But I was in the College of Agriculture at the University of Florida. Got a degree in food and resource economics. Honestly, had no idea what I would do with that degree. Haven't really done much with it. Although learning a little bit about the Farm Bill in my undergraduate studies, has kind of had a little bit of crossover in what I do today. But in all honesty, it was my involvement with Ducks Unlimited in college that led me to being involved in the policy arena today, because following graduation from college, I moved to Washington, D.C. for an internship with Ducks Unlimited and their government affairs office in D.C.
Well, it's amazing what it takes in terms of collaboration by so many different organizations, both non-governmental, governmental, and otherwise, to preserve conservation enjoyment in this state. I mean, in this nation, certainly in Mississippi, and we see that all the time. But the National Shooting Sports Foundation, first, let's just start with what is it, and then we'll talk about some of the focus that you guys have had over the years.
For sure. So the National Shooting Sports Foundation is a trade association for America's firearms and ammunition industry. So we represent firearm and ammunition manufacturers, distributors, retailers, shooting ranges, endemic media, and sportsmen's organizations across this country. People ask what the difference is between us and the NRA, and it's the checkout counter. We represent the business interests, whereas NRA or other organizations represent the consumer interests.
Well, that's cool, and it's an important organization that's doing incredibly important work. You actually had a stint as a state lobbyist for the National Rifle Association. Tell me a little bit about your time there.
I did. So following my internship with Ducks Unlimited, I was fortunate enough to join the state and local affairs division at the NRA, and started at the bottom, answering phone calls and doing expense reports. And within about a year and a half, I worked my way up to being promoted to a state lobbyist for the NRA. And at that time, I covered 4 states. I had Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, and Indiana. And as you would know, with those states being very pro-gun, it was a lot of offense. And I'll tell you what, it was an extreme honor to be able to work for the organization, now representing more than 5 million law-abiding gun owners here in this country. But when I had the opportunity in 2014 to join the National Shooting Sports Foundation, kind of as their number 2 in their state affairs division, it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I'll certainly be forever grateful to the NRA and the opportunity they gave me, and really helping me learn this issue. We see it from the outside, but when you're on the front lines working this issue in state capitals around the country, that's when you have to become very knowledgeable. But that's also what sparked even a deeper passion for me on, being on the front lines and fighting for gun owners and Second Amendment supporters and sportsmen across this country.
This whole notion of the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, is something that is, we're not going to go into a big, long conversation about it, but it's something that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts for more reasons than we have time to talk about today. But in a recent conversation with Will Primos, we got to talking about Ukraine. You see the flag over my shoulder. I think all Americans are sort of, just still, just touched by the spirit of Ukrainians to fight for their country and for their freedom. And, if they weren't bearing arms, where would they be today? But in the conversation with Will, Will kept, he brought the conversation back to the Second Amendment and how the situation in Ukraine is reminding us, as wild as it may be hard to get your head around the possibilities here in America, which we hope never happens. This right to bear arms is a very serious issue. And frankly, I bet in your world, people talk about it more today than they were before as a result of what's happening in Ukraine. Do you face that on a daily basis?
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing it more and more, and now we have a real life example of why the individuals and the law-abiding people in a country need the ability to take up firearms for self-defense. So there's no doubt that this is a great time and a great learning example for our country. And I think you've seen even the firearm industry in our country wanting to step up to help the Ukrainians as well. Vista Outdoor last week announcing that they wanted to send 1 million rounds between their companies of Federal, Remington, CCI, and Spear. So, again, this is, while it is a horrific time for the Ukrainians, I think it's a wake-up call for people here in our country to recognize that we have a right that pretty much no other country in this world has the privilege of exercising.
When we come back, we're going
leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Coast View. I have my friend Trevor Santos, who works for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And at the beginning, we just kind of determined where his love of the outdoors came from and the work that they're doing across the United States to not only protect the Second Amendment, but also to focus on conservation efforts that are important to all of us. Trevor, if you go back and you look back at some of sort of what we were observing at the turn of the 20th century, we had a lot of work to do when it came to conservation. And for the most part, we really listened to that, and we've really been focused on it. There's a lot of work to be done for sure, but why don't you kind of rebuild some of that history for us so we can appreciate things like, for example, the Pittman-Robertson Act that maybe people have heard of before?
Ricky, I think as we moved into the turn of the 20th century, there was a lot of market hunting, a lot of commercial hunting, and overhunting of wildlife. And it ultimately came down on hunters recognizing that there had to be a pivot. Otherwise, what we loved or what they loved so much wouldn't exist in the next several years, much less the next decade or century. So it really was left up to hunters to decide, okay, we've got to do something about this. And it was at that same time that the firearm industry recognized that they could do something. And it was actually in the 1900s that the firearm industry called on Congress to impose an excise tax on the sale of firearms and ammunition, with those dollars ultimately going back to conservation efforts. In 1937, the Pittman-Robertson Act was enacted by Congress. And what it did was it levied a 10% sales tax on handguns and 11% sales tax on long guns, ammunition, and archery equipment that would ultimately go into a trust fund. And once that fund was collected at the end of the year, they would then disperse it back to the state wildlife agencies to use those dollars for conservation efforts, wildlife habitat management, hunter education, shooting ranges. So it really was on the backs of hunters in the firearm industry that today's conservation efforts are possible.
And it has led to some amazing investments in wildlife restoration in so many different forms across the United States. You've got a lot of responsibility in your job in multiple states, but Georgia specifically. Let's just talk about Georgia as a best practice right now as it relates to what they've done in addition to the Pittman-Robertson Act to add a whole nother layer of investment to the state of Georgia that is going to pay back for years to come. And I think one of the things I talk about on this show all the time is the reason why Mississippi needs a dedicated funding source is we need to be able to compete with states like Georgia to get federal matching funds. And the fact that we don't have a fund, we've been losing out on probably somewhere in the range of $40 million a year in matching funds. But tell us a little bit about what's happening in Georgia.
So before I get into Georgia, I'll let the viewers know. So when you talk about the matching funds, those are for the Pittman-Robertson, the match. But what the state has to do is come up with 25% of those funds. So while the state is selling hunting licenses and fishing licenses, they really need other revenue sources because the hunting and fishing license are helping these agencies run. But when we talk about Georgia, back in 2018, the legislature had a resolution that would create a dedicated funding source to help the state match and get these PR dollars, or Pittman-Robertson dollars. So the legislature passed the resolution, and that was ultimately sent to the voters of Georgia, recognizing that conservation was a necessity. Georgia voters overwhelmingly approved the constitutional amendment by more than 80% of the vote. So now what you have in Georgia is a dedicated funding source, really allowing the state to have more leverage to get these federal Pittman-Robertson dollars. And as I looked last night, in 2021 and 22, the state granted more than $28 million in grants. And what the projects we're talking about are updating state parks and trails, but we're also talking about managing wildlife management areas, which for me as a hunter is extremely important because when I go out in the woods, you know, I want to see a well-managed piece of property that is being funded by me, the taxpayer, me, a gun owner, me as someone paying for a hunting license.
Well, what Georgia as a best practice in this area has provided for Mississippi is sort of a blueprint for what could be. You know, taking a relatively, when you think about the amount of investment we could and should be making to conservation efforts in our state, taking a relatively low amount of money and building it into something that's very, very significant. In the case of Georgia, you guys have really been a best practice. The other thing that I think, by doing it as a state referendum, by having an 80% vote, certainly the work that we've done here in the state of Mississippi certainly gives us the kind of feedback in our research that says Mississippians would support something like this in the range of 80% as well. But instead of going the referendum route, we went the legislative route, and it's been tough. I mean, the first year we made a little bit of progress, and then it stalled. We didn't get anything through. This year, it started out like it was going to be another stall, but the good news is we're beginning to have a lot of progress right now. But, you know, at the end of the day, you see what it will do for Mississippi if we create a dedicated funding source and get this bill passed, don't you?
Absolutely. And what it comes down to is creating these public-private partnerships. We saw a great example of that in Mississippi several years ago when Winchester donated $1.5 million towards a shooting facility. So it really is when the state comes together with private entities that we can make great things happen. And I think by having the Mississippi Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, you're now creating opportunities for private entities, NGOs to come in and say, look, we want to assist Mississippi, whether it's on public land, because I know you've got, I think, 10% of the state in public land, but you've also got a lot of private land that's ultimately, you know, going to benefit wildlife. So I think it's a win-win all the way around, whether you're a hunter, you're a non-hunter, you're just someone who likes to enjoy the outdoors.
For sure. I think, again, we've made a lot of progress, and I kind of gave a pretty serious update on where we were last week. But it seems like finally we're making progress on this, you know, this overall view that you cannot have serious conservation effort if you don't include private land. I mean, people want to think of private landowners as rich people, but the truth is most private landowners in Mississippi don't have the means to do the kind of conservation efforts that we need to be doing in the state. And by having a dedicated funding source and the ability to go get federal funds, we can begin to really fund some efforts across the state that are going to really make a difference. And you've seen that. It's interesting that you've continued to be involved in organizations like Ducks Unlimited. I mentioned Ducks Unlimited because they've done a lot of habitat creation, but as others have pointed out, it involves all non-governmental organizations that are involved in this in conservation, and that we're lucky in this state and we're lucky in this nation to have so many non-governmental organizations focused on conservation. Of course, DU is just one of them, but it really does take a team of people from all walks of life, governmental and non-governmental, the private sector, the public sector, to make conservation efforts work, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, is a team effort. You see me and the National Shooting Sports Foundation representing the firearm industry coming together with a Ducks Unlimited, a strictly conservation organization. But, NSSF and the firearm industry recognizes that conservation is key to the future of what we love so much, whether, it's raising those needed matching funds for shooting range construction and improvement, or if it's just improving wildlife habitat. We know that, the industry isn't going to have future consumers without these opportunities. So we're here to support it, and we're here to be part of the team with Ducks Unlimited and Safari Club International and the Mississippi Wildlife Foundation. We're here to play our part, and we hope that the voters and the constituents in Mississippi recognize that this is, huge for the state and huge for the future of our hunting heritage.
Well, I want to give you an update. Chairman Neil Whaley, who is the chairman of the Wildlife and Fisheries and Parks Committee in the Senate, we've had an ongoing sort of invitation out to him. We heard from him this morning, and I think we're going to try to have him on next Monday, and we'll get an update. So the key now is, they're not wanting to go with a diversion of sales tax. They're wanting to go with more of an appropriation. What we want them to do now is put the money in there. Put the money in there and recognize and sort of understand that this has to be multi-year. It's not a one and done deal. Most of the projects require multiple years, and we need the commitment of funds to be able to do that. So I'm glad that we're still making progress, and I look forward to staying in touch with you, Trevor, as we continue to watch what happens in Mississippi. I appreciate you spending some time with me this morning, buddy.
Hey, Ricky, thank you so much for having me today.
It's been a pleasure. This is Trevor Santos, who works with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and actually nationally. And he's really, really watching closely what happens in the state of Mississippi, and others like him are doing that as well. Hey, when we come back, we're gonna continue the conversation with Waldo Cleveland, and we're going to talk about archery, youth archery specifically. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors from the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, my wife Ann and I are overcoming, we're on the backside of the flu, so I'm a little froggy this morning, but enjoying another Super Talk Outdoors. I especially enjoyed having that conversation with Trevor Santos. We need people like Trevor who really have a view of what's happening across the United States. To help us find those best practices and bring them back to Mississippi, and the fact that he's working with people like Ed Penny and Alex Littlejohn and a long list of other organizations focused on helping preserve and enhance the conservation enjoyment we have here in the state of Mississippi. We really appreciate that, and we appreciate him and his organization working so closely with us. So anyway, now let's shift gears and move over to someone I've really been looking forward to having a conversation with and getting to know better. Waldo Cleveland, the famous Waldo Cleveland, who has really kind of dedicated his life to youth archery. Without any further ado, let me just welcome Waldo to the show. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Well, let's do this. Let's tell people who you are to begin with. You're from the Columbia area of Mississippi. You had a long history, literally as a very, very competitive archery guy. You had your own archery business, but I want to kind of go through those steps of your life. How did you actually get into bow hunting to begin with?
Well, my dad was a true dyed in the wool bow hunter, and he got me started when I was very young, and it was a great family sport, and we got to spend a lot of time together doing that.
So, literally, what was your favorite sport growing up in terms of what you went after as a bow hunter?
It really didn't matter to me. I love shooting bullseyes. I love shooting buck deer. It was whatever, first come, first serve. As long as I was shooting a bow, I was happy.
So you went on to open one of the South's largest archery pro shops. You did. I think you opened it in 1985. You served a bunch of states, I think 44 states and 14 countries. What made what you did so popular?
Well, we were able to give customer service, and I believe customer service is the key to any successful business at this point. And our customer service has been lost across the world in the last few years. But in the old days, we would bring a customer in, say they would fly in from Saudi Arabia, they'd land in New Orleans, we'd go pick them up, bring them up, they'd spend 3 or 4 days in my pro shop. We would rig them out completely, send them home happy. And many, many times people from these families came back again and again and again.
Well, I tell you, for bow hunters, we get this. I've done a little bit of bow hunting. My sons love to bow hunt. But having an archery pro shop that you can work with to get set up properly, it's a big deal. And is it becoming a little bit of a lost art in Mississippi?
No doubt, no doubt. The crossbows are a little bit easier to achieve success with, and it seems like the bows are not quite as I guess you'd say prevalent as they used to be. But some people like the more the faster bows, the crossbows, the scope sights, but there's still a huge percentage of us bow hunters that have went backwards, and we're back shooting recurves and longbows.
Yeah, no, I've seen that transition begin to happen. Okay, so you went on to shoot professionally. How did you get into that? And let's tell people a little bit about your accomplishments along the way.
Well, I shot as an amateur in 1985 and 1986, and my scores were above most of the professionals. So, of course, I thought I would get rich, make all the money in the world shooting a bow. Didn't realize what it cost to get there, if you know what I'm saying. But long story short, a good friend of mine, Terry Ragsdale, partnered up with me. We shot Tony Cleland out in Denver, Colorado, and we shot in partners. Won some really big tournaments to begin with, and it seemed like it just ventured out from there, just another rabbit trail.
Went on to win 5 national titles.
Yes, sir.
That's pretty significant. What's interesting is you look at it today. I guess sponsorships are kind of the key to making it today. Were sponsorships a big part of what was, sort of the financial calculus for you back in those days?
No doubt, no doubt. And again, I bragged one time, very out of line. I made a statement bragging on some money that I had made, and I noticed my wife was watching me and shaking her head. And when I got home, she said, "Let me show you how much it cost you to make that money." And wow, what a humbling experience. But she's a very humbling person.
I follow the bone collectors guys, Michael Waddell and T-Bone. Did you get to know T-Bone along the way?
I did.
He's fighting cancer now. In fact, we've reached out to him to join us here on Super Talk Outdoors. Hopefully we'll have him on an upcoming show. But our prayers go out to T-Bone and what he's going through. What an inspiration he is. But he's sort of the old school archery guy who knows how to set up bows and whatever. You kind of do what you do. And we need more of those kind of guys. It's harder to find guys who really are able to go at it full bore. I love telling the story of Will Primos and Brad and how they came to got to know each other. Brad used to set up Will's bows, and Will wanted 2 bows exactly set up perfectly, and he would come during the week and he would cause a line to show outside the door because he wanted it done so specifically, and it took so much time. And finally, Brad said, "Will, I can't do this anymore. You're going to have to come back. Can you come back Sunday after church? And I'll take all the time you need." And eventually they became very good friends, and the rest is kind of history. But you know that story well, don't you?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you, the names that you mentioned, some of the best bow hunters in the world live right here in the state of Mississippi.
We're lucky. I say it all the time, Waldo, that this is the capital of the outdoors in the United States. And the reason why is because, you can find certain aspects of what we do here in Mississippi that's better in other states, but you're not going to find a collection of different dimensions where, I think, let's see, Alex Littlejohn said you can shoot a duck in the Delta in the morning and then go to the coast that afternoon and catch a redfish. I mean, it's a really special place in that regard. And you've literally committed your entire career to not just bow hunting, but along the way, you got really interested in making sure we're pushing the love of the outdoors to our kids. Now, you're doing it through archery, but at the end of the day, what your goal is to bring the outdoors to as many youth as possible so that we can preserve our outdoor enjoyment in the state of Mississippi. That's been a big part of your life, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And, our natural resources have to be taken care of. We have to nurture our natural resources. But our most precious natural resource is probably our children. And if our children are not into it and rolling with the flow and keeping the heritage alive, we're in trouble.
We are in trouble. I say it all the time on my show, but I have 2 sons and a daughter. And some of my best hunts in my life, I never held a gun or a bow, just being with them in the outdoors and letting them do it. And then my friends, like Clay Wagner and his sons, loving to hunt with his sons. And then more recently with my friends, the Dunn family up in the Mississippi Delta, and hunting with Clint's son, Jackson Dunn. I just love spending time in the outdoors with kids. And the truth is, they are our future. And what's amazing about what you have done through your archery program, Waldo, is that you've brought the outdoors to over 50,000 kids annually. And I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that is making a mark. You feel it, don't you?
Yes, we do. And I believe we feel it all across the state. The numbers are extraordinary. And, our sport, you don't have to be able to be one of the 5 kids in a school that can hit a baseball over the fence. You don't have to be one of the 10 schools and children in the school that can hit a softball over the fence, dunk a basketball, or kick a football through a goal post. But our sport, 99% of the shooters and the youth that we have in our program can be successful, very successful at archery. And archery, I'm 57 years old now. The football, baseball, and basketball is gone, but that archery is a life sport, and I believe these kids are going to enjoy it from now on out.
Well, what happened? Okay, so you come from sort of winning national championships and working to involve more kids in the effort. Things kind of progress, and you end up becoming the director of the Archery in Mississippi Schools program, which is better known as AIMS, and it continues to evolve to this day. You have made marks in more ways than one. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what that journey's been like to form AIMS and sort of where the program is today. And how did you get to the point of somewhere between 50 and 100,000 students involved in that program? That is remarkable, Waldo. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Waldo Cleveland. See you after this break.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors as we listen to my friend Steve Azar sing One Mississippi, which hopefully will become the state song for Mississippi soon. What a great song that is, and I thank my friend Steve Azar for letting us use his song as the theme song for Super Talk Outdoors. We're having a conversation with Waldo Cleveland. He is the director of the Archery in Mississippi Schools program, AIMS, as better known as the AIMS program. He's got a long history in archery, and I mean, literally between 50 and 100,000 kids a year involved in this program. It's really incredible. So let's come back to first of all, where are you coming from right now, Waldo?
I'm at the Archery Center in Jackson.
Tell me about that archery center.
Wow, this archery center is unbelievable. It's got a full indoor range. Our collegiate archers practicing here, our high school archers practicing here, middle school all the way down. We've got indoor, outdoor ranges. We've got 3D ranges. We've got spot ranges. We've even got skeet throwing machines to shoot skeet with a bow and arrow. So we probably, this is the finest archery center across the nation. I love it.
The capital of the outdoors. The capital of the, hey, listen, when you're the capital of the outdoors in the U.S., you got to have first-class facilities. You got to have first-class private land enjoyment. You've got to have good coordination with private landowners so that we can all be in the conservation together. And that center where you are located now is really one of the prides of our conservation and outdoors enjoyment in the state of Mississippi. Are you surprised with how significant the Ames program has become over the years?
Of all people, I would have figured I would not be surprised, but yes, I never had any thoughts of it turning as big as it's turned.
What caused that? Just because people are being introduced to it? Is it because you got volunteers and people across the state that are engaged in the program who are as committed as you are to youth? How did we get to this point?
Well, it's many small things, just as you said, but the need for the program. We had a niche, and we fill that niche perfectly. And it's almost like having the only gas station in the state of Mississippi. Everybody's going to get fuel there, and these children love it. And it's incredible, and I think the sky's the limit. The future holds bigger numbers than what we have now.
Well, listen, something we talked about on this show a bunch of times, Waldo, is the fact that COVID was bad for a lot of reasons. I'm certainly, as it relates to your program, bringing kids together in the facility and doing work together, it slowed all that down. But what it did is it increased the number of hunting, fishing licenses across the state. People felt safe in the outdoors. People were being introduced back into the outdoors in ways they weren't before. You guys found a way to sort of make it through the COVID situation and come out on the other side with almost like a renewed breath back into archery and just in general, people who want to love the outdoors. Where are you guys today?
Well, the COVID deal was pretty tough on us. The first year we canceled our shoots, coasted through. The second year, everything looked like we were going to be right back in the stream of things. And man, it blew up on us right within 2 weeks of the finish. When this happened, we had come up with a backup plan of a virtual archery shoot. So the kids were able to shoot their bows at their schools and shoot their scores in by telephone. And we wound up having over 5,000 shooters or student athletes at that event.
So it doesn't surprise me you guys rebounded from COVID. It really doesn't, because people just, they're trying to find ways to enjoy the outdoors, and once they fall in love with archery, you don't fall out of love with it just because of COVID happened. You find your way to move forward. I bet a lot of kids did a lot of practicing when they couldn't be together. So hey, listen, we only got a couple of minutes left. Let's go to where are you headed with Ames Extreme? Tell me more about that.
Well, Ames Extreme is nothing more than a bridge program. We're using fancier equipment. We're using release aids, sights, peep sights, stabilizers, the whole 9 yards. We're referring to this as our varsity archery program, and we're only allowing 10th, 11th, and 12th graders to shoot in this one. We wanted to start out with 10 pilot program schools for this year, and we're already up to 23 schools in it. So I believe it's going to grow out of sight, just like our regular Ames program did.
Waldo, that is so cool. It's neat the way you guys are innovative. The one question as we get kind of ready to wind this down, I bet you have seen some amazingly talented people that would have never thought they would be into archery. Now they're incredible leaders.
No doubt. And a lot of these kids, we send 25, 30 kids a year out on scholarship to collegiate programs all across the U.S. We are one of the heaviest recruited states in the nation for archery. Makes me feel good.
I bet it makes you feel good. Hey, Waldo, it has been a pleasure to get to know you better. Congratulations on all of your success. We will have you back. I want to hear some specific stories of people that you would have never expected to pick up archery who are now leaders in this nation, young people that are just doing amazing things. This has been Waldo Cleveland at Cleland, and it's been a real pleasure to see you. Have a great day. Have a great week. Stay safe in the outdoors, and we'll see you next Monday.